It's no surprise that I think HR and people leaders have one of the hardest roles at any organization. For me, it feels like sometimes we're not seen as true organizational partners, or our role is so diminished and viewed as not important. And I think over the last few years, we've seen a massive shift in that, and more HR leaders are looked to first to solve tough organizational problems. But as I kick off this new season about relationships at work, I knew I wanted to start with the most complicated relationship out there. And no, it's not mine with Justin Timberlake. It's HR and why we're sometimes not positioned as the true partners across the organization. And joining me today is Chris Haygood. Chris Haygood is the Chief Executive Officer of Astute Edge. He consistently delivers impactful transformational strategies that identify diverse human capital needs while strategically matching those needs with proven solutions. He's helped leaders discover and use analytics to re-engineer their performance management and create highly engaged and high-performing cultures. Prior to Astute Edge, Chris served as the executive-level trust advisor to C-suite and board members, senior leaders, and client teams. His expansive vision, detailed planning, and forward-looking analysis have been responsible for millions in growth and revenue for global leaders, including Dell, Gallup, Press Ganey, Prime Chief of Staff, and PSP Metrics. Chris earned his bachelor's degree in business management with a concentration in legal studies and his MBA. And as a Gallup certified strengths coach, Chris is an active member of the global Clifton Strengths community since 2015. Chris, welcome to the I Hate It Here pod.
Thank you for having me. Very excited.
I am so pumped to dig into our conversation today, and no, I will not ask you to read me for filth with my Gallup strengths because my balconies and basements worksheet does that every time for me.
Ooh, the OG terms. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Because I have, what is it that I have? I have command as one of my top strengths.
Nice.
And that one, the basement of that said I was very bossy. And I was like, hey, we don't say that to women.
Yeah,
okay?
We don't attack women like that. Not on this pod.
Let me be. I'm not bossy. I'm a boss. I think that's like an actual rap lyric. I'm already being so corny and this episode just started, so get ready for this. This season, I'm talking a lot about like relationships at work. And this is the first episode of the season. So Chris, thank you for being my season opener. We're coming in hot. And I'm going to ask every guest. I do this thing every season. I pick a question. I ask every guest that comes on that season the same question. And so this season, I'm asking every guest, what do you believe is the key to maintaining strong relationships at work?
It's a great question. I think the drum that I always beat, no matter what we're discussing when it comes to our industry, our world of HR, talent, people, and culture starts with clarity, starts with alignment, and then prioritization. And so I think there's a lot for us to do on the front end of making sure that we're walking into the right relationships that are actually going to appreciate the strengths and the specificities that we're bringing, but also be in the environment that's actually healthy for us as well. All relationships are a give and take. Professional relationships are no different. But I think having enough sincerity, being honest with what we want, what we need, and of course, finding the right partners to build upon those same commonalities is really important when it comes to the workplace itself.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm just like, I just want to know what you want from me. Like you said, clarity. And I was like, I feel that in my soul. Cause some days I'm like, what do you want from me? Like, I just want to know. Cause I think the expectation setting of relationships is so skewed sometimes, where people are like, I'm great at setting expectations, and they're not. And so then you're left with like so much confusion of like, what am I even doing here?
Yeah. And I think we're also in a somewhat of a dire situation when it comes to feedback. I think we all say that we love feedback and that we give feedback, but when it comes to that clarity piece, again, in the professional setting, I'm not sure we're all doing the same amount of work of understanding what we need and what we want. So our own personal clarity that we're bringing into those both workplaces and those specific relationships. And that's why I just think it's a starting point.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I love that answer. That's some good tips for people as they're thinking about their relationships at work. But for today, something I want to dig into with you is just really thinking about this role of HR and people leaders and why we're sometimes not seen as this like or true organizational partner. And I want to dig into like what that actually means and talk more about that today. But let's start there. Like, why do you think HR leaders often struggle to be seen as true partners by the rest of the leadership team?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple bigger buckets that'll answer this. Unfortunately, I think it starts with perception. I think the perception to this day that the function overall is overly administrative. I think with the overall value still being that this function helps get people in, and when we're ready as an org to get them out, which is such a short change of what the function and what the actual art of the talent, people, and culture role actually is. I also think that with that perception, it's a historical perception. So it's really hard to battle against maybe the individualized perception that might exist in an organization that you or I might be in that same seat versus if we think about like media, TV, movies, how are we actually perceived even in those fictional lanes? And it's all still very administrative. I think there's an actual interesting piece too that sometimes I feel like I'm going to get canceled by our people in the industry, but it has to do with value and business acumen. I think it's twofold. There's a perception that those in the seats of people and culture, talent, HR, they don't actually have strong business acumen. And that cuts both ways. Sometimes it's true. And that's why I think I'm on cancel alert. But sometimes it is true. Sometimes it's true. Now, with that being said, there are a few things that we can do about this. The first is brush up on our business acumen. I know a number of leaders where they do love having that hard line of, I don't have to worry about the ops. I don't have to worry about the finances. I don't have to worry about what's actually happening in the industry at large because I only deal with our people here internally. Not great, but it does add to those perceptions. So when if the individual's even lucky enough, I say that facetiously, but lucky enough to be on the senior leadership team, if we're having really hard decisions about things like, layoffs, oftentimes those individuals are brought in at the tail end of, we have made this decision. How are we going to do it? They should be in the beginning of those conversations of what are we actually considering? What are the perspectives that we, as the rest of the team, are missing? And as that people and culture person, they should really have their finger on the pulse. I think if nothing else, every senior leader team needs to have someone be the ears, eyes, the mouth of objectivity. And oftentimes that's not the person in the people and culture seat. And that is wild to me. But like I said, it cuts both ways. If we have not exhibited that we understand the overall business, or at least that we're thinking about the overall business beyond just the people, if we only sound like the bleeding heart, then I understand why there are times where we're just not invited to the table in the way that we should be, and why our teams aren't getting the real value of having our expertise in making really critical and strategic decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big mindset shift that happened for me personally when I moved from kind of like the director level in HR to like more senior leadership levels was really thinking about the business. I was like, I cannot develop these solutions without the business lens. And like maybe before I was doing like very individual contributor tactical work, but that real shift, it took me understanding like, what is our business? What does our business do? What's our space in the competitive landscape? And now I do things like I look at just our business from like financial perspective, but I also look at our business from like an industry perspective. Where are we in the industry? How do we compare to our competitors? What does this mean? Like I even seek out those leaders in those organizations as like thought partners to me too. Because I think a lot of times we view ourselves in competition with people who are our competition. But for HR, you can actually learn from them. They're probably dealing with the same things you're dealing with internally.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I also think that, to your last point, benchmarking is probably one of the strongest tools that we have in business in general, but particularly for HR people. I mean, what's the market doing? What's the market saying? What are others seeing before potentially we see it, or vice versa is really important and valuable. But even for that internal lens, I understand as someone who's been fortunate enough to be in senior leadership positions and coach them, consult with them, so on and so forth, that if you need to make really critical decisions very quickly, unfortunately, you are going to pick and choose who needs to be in that room if you believe they're going to drive value or not drive value. So again, if we're not showing up with that same lens that you, obviously in your own maturation as a great practitioner, if you're not showing up with that lens, or at least showing that you can step into those roles, then that's another reason why we're not invited to the table.
Yeah. I just always want to be at that table. So I'm like, how can I be better? How can I be smarter? How can I know more? And it's interesting, when I took this role at Workweek, I did ask the CEO directly, like, are you interested in teaching me how the business operates? Because I think the best HR leaders out there, the best ones, honestly, I'm sorry if this hurts anyone's feelings, but they understand their organization in and out. I have to know what each team does. I have to understand their scope of work. It actually helps me better predict like hiring and headcount needs. It helps me predict challenges they might face. I have to understand how the teams all work together, how a product comes to be, because I think that actually puts me in a better position to be successful as a people leader. But I think so often we don't do that work. We're like overwhelmed by everything we're doing that we don't do that work. And so when you take on these jobs, I just ask, like, when you're onboarding to a new organization, really spending the first 2 weeks being like, what do I need to know? Meet everyone you can meet, understand all their problems before you start getting into like the grind of HR work. I think starting there could be really helpful. I just also totally I love knowing everything. I love knowing everything. I'm like, I want to be in the know. I'm nosy.
I mean, you kind of have to be in the role. Kind of have to be in the role.
I think so. Listen, curiosity is one of my 3 values. I have 3. Curiosity is number 1. It means I'm going to ask a lot of questions. And I also just think as HR leaders, if we approach everything with the curiosity, you are going to learn so much more. You have to open up your mind to that. So I think like that plays a big role in like how we could be struggling to be seen by the rest of the leadership team. I think this next question, I'm so excited to ask you because I feel like we're going to have some juicy answers. What are some common misconceptions that other executives have about the role of HR?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to try to avoid being redundant.
Okay, good. Hit me with the misconceptions.
Yeah. What I think actually the biggest one that maybe it's more of a cause than a symptom is that the function is a cost center and is not really correlated to revenue generation. And I was very careful and specific in my wording before, as I was saying that there needs to be someone of that senior leadership team that's objectivity or objective. But oftentimes in the seats that we're talking about, they're the heart. And again, no one wants to listen to the heart when we have to make difficult decisions or if it's related to revenue. That's just the reality. Whether it's right or wrong, that's just where we are. So HR as a cost center, I think, drives a really big misconception as to what value we can bring to the conversation, which again, to avoid redundancy, does get back into ensuring that even if I am the heart of the conversation, I need to be able to put things into context. And I think a lot of the challenge, or at least a lot of what we try to help some of our clients that are in these seats, is how can we reframe what we are seeing, hearing, thinking, and even know due to that curiosity of knowing our people? How do we put that and frame it in a way that actually makes sense for the strategic vision of the org? And so it's putting ourselves in a different light, but I don't want to downplay the fact that there's just a lot of misperceptions that are stacked against us to begin with. I would just like to have more support as to how do we chip away at those in our actual day-to-days.
Yeah. Oh God. When I think of, I have been guilty of saying HR is a cost center. I feel like that sometimes, and I should really reframe my thinking around that because it's not true. Like everybody else, the business performs better because of the work that HR does. So we're not really a cost center. We can be a revenue generating function. I do believe that. Like we are the core of everything that makes people like productive, like engaged in their environment. The second piece of that I think is just super interesting is you're right. There are a lot of misconceptions stacked against us. Even when I meet people in public, like when I meet strangers, I'll go get my nails done and I'll talk to everyone around me. It's a problem. I like to talk to people. It's clearly why I have this podcast. All 6 hours I like to talk. But I'll talk to people. And the second I tell them I'm in HR, you can like see a shift in the person that is across. And I'm like just chatting with the women getting my nails done. Like you just see a shift. And so I think about like, these are people who aren't even maybe they're not executives at their company, maybe they're just like employees, and there's a shift.
Yeah.
Then when we get into the executive team too, it's like a lot of people tend to look at us as like, well, how do you think it's going to make the employees feel? Like that heart piece too.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I think those misperceptions, there's probably like, I would probably say it's one of my top 5 pet peeves when people think a certain thing about me and they don't actually spend the time to understand like where my expertise comes from and how I approach things. I get really upset. So I think a lot of HR people are dealing with that misperception, like the old school notion of you're just a cost center, you're just administrative, you just tell me about people's feelings, not about facts. And so I think like those misperceptions can add up and they are stacked against us, unfortunately. So hopefully we'll dig into today, like how to deal with a lot of that stuff. I think something that interests me, and this might also get us, I don't think canceled, but this might be a hot take for some people. Like, organizational structure does play a role in our influence as HR people. So how do you think the structures that are out there can actually impact the influence of HR?
Yeah, in big ways. I think the needs are really important based off of your people and really your operation. So there are a number of organizations that, to be really honest, they have chief people officers, CHROs, and they probably shouldn't, by way of their size, by way of what they're actually managing. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't have a strategic HR voice in their room. But if we're talking about actual structures, I am not of the mindset that if you have someone in an HR leadership seat rolling up to a CFO, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is a bad thing if your company is too large to have such a structure. But when you have that misalignment, again, going back to that second tenet that I started with, when you have that misalignment and you don't have the right people in those right seats, both structurally and potentially just by way of fit, then you're going to have challenges with who are we listening to? Why are we listening to them? We're definitely going to have challenges with resource allocation, or really for our function, resource misallocation. Because if we are going to, at the same time, hold the bag as to things like turnover, overall productivity, performance, leadership development, even just professional development, we're going to be holding that bag, and yet we're not set up for success with the actual resources, support, team members, and things of that nature. It's totally unfair. But the structure itself, again, it's more strategic. If you don't have a leader that believes in the value of what their people leaders are bringing, then you're not going to be put in the right position to actually be successful.
Yeah. Hot take, I don't like when HR reports to the CFO. Actually, I look at people jobs. Like I look at job descriptions all the time. It's like I'll send my friends jobs constantly. And I think something that's really interesting is if I see that the HR role reports into the COO or the CFO, I usually think absolutely not. I would never work there. I don't know if that's just like a hot take from me. I think like what the CFO wants and what HR wants are very at odds with one another. CFO is really thinking like, how do I save this money? Yeah. And HR people are like, I actually need the money to do a lot of the things. And I think it's important if you are in a small founder-led business for HR to report to the CEO. But like maybe that's a hot take.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay, maybe it's not a hot take.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, of course it's a hot take. My piece is
it?
It depends, right? Because
fine. Okay, yes. Context.
Everything, context and nuance, the most annoying things ever. But if we take what you shared, let's really be honest about this, because I also have a tangent that we'll see if it makes sense to go into.
Let's go. Let's do it.
If we take your example from a few minutes ago, if we take Hiba, who is at that, I think you say at the director level, you kind of made that leap of really connecting the dots, not only what's in front of you, but how does it holistically have impact? If you are with a smaller entity and you as the entity actually can't manage, or you can't provide the right environment for Hiba the director versus Hiba the manager level. So you need someone who's strong in the practice itself, but maybe you aren't actually ready for that same practice to then bubble up into that strategic leadership. Then I actually don't want you to create a CHRO or CPO role, because that's just really going to frustrate the person who actually knows what they're doing that takes that role. Or you're going to actually bring on someone that isn't quite ready, but they're going to take the title. And that has its own slew of challenges.
Interesting. Okay, fine. I'll take that tangent. I'll take it. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's right. But I don't know. I just think like at the same time, I don't know, maybe I give too much credit to CEOs. Actually, I probably don't give enough credit to CEOs. I'm usually ragging on them. But like, I think HR should report to them because they're usually like the vision of the business. But I have worked with CEOs who are just like so bad at the people stuff. And when you then have an HR leader who is also like, again, at that manager level, who's thinking tactically and not strategically, that's a recipe for disaster. Like,
I agree with that.
The company is not going to get any better. It's just going to get worse. So I see what you're saying. I'll take your point.
And if I have it my way, HR should never roll up to CFOs. Yeah. I think at best it's COO. And I think that's because you should always be marrying the people with the operations. But I very much believe that there should be a strategic position for all people, culture, talent, HR, whichever title works best for you. That's in that senior leadership team. That's what I believe in. But as someone that is working with really lower middle market organizations, like it doesn't make sense for you to be a company of 15 and you have like 7 C-suite positions. It doesn't make sense.
Happens so often.
So often.
That happens at a lot of startups. But okay, well then another tangent, and we'll get back to like our regular scheduled set of events soon. What do you think is the right number, or do you have a number in mind where you're like, once they reach that number of employees, they really do need a CPO, a CHRO, or like a senior people leader?
Yeah, so I'll probably answer it a little bit backwards. I think it's roughly around like 20, 25 that you need a senior people leader. And I'm very cool with that being like a VP of HR or, VP level. I think once you start creeping into 75, maybe 100, you start to get into that C-suite. Yeah. You actually need someone that's going to help you because presumably you're going to be in some sort of growth mode. And so at that point, 75 and 100 becomes like 200, 250 very quickly. And you really need that someone with the practical but strategic abilities to help you get there.
Great answer. I usually say for like the stat I read and I usually stick true to is like for every 50 employees you add, you probably want to add like another person on the people team. Mm-hmm. But we're often like the last team to get any resources.
Yep.
So
which is great, isn't it?
That's a whole other thing. No, I hate this job. I love this job. Every episode, every season, I feel like I give people just like a rambling of, I hate this job, but I love this job. I do love this job. It's just, it's hard because we're combating, again, what we're talking about this episode, we're combating so much sometimes. And it can be really overwhelming and really frustrating to feel like you know something so well. And then every single person in the room wants to give an opinion on it. And I just want to be like, you did not do this job for 10 plus years or 20 plus years or 50 plus years for your opinion to matter any more than my 50 years of experience, which I don't have 50, but like, that's how I feel sometimes. And like, I'm trying to be humble and be like reasonable when people want to give feedback on people things and then really try to explain, hey, here's why we do this thing. But like one time I explained our compensation philosophy to somebody and the feedback they gave me was, that was kind of condescending how you explained it. And I was like, I literally just explained it. I didn't say anything. I've never been described as condescending. So I was like, me condescending? I literally just like read you verbatim what our compensation philosophy is. And so like a lot of HR leaders are dealing with that where like we come to the room with our expertise and everyone's like, but what if we did this instead? And I'm like, what if we didn't? And we just did the thing I told you we should do because I'm the person who's the expert here. Which, okay, brings me to like my next question because I think this one is the never ending struggle of any HR person. In what ways do you think HR strategic value is overlooked by other departments?
How many answers
all the ways?
Am I allowed?
All the ways. As Megan Trainor would say, because I'm on a Megan Trainor kick right now, all the ways.
Yeah. There's such a miss in the strategic partnership. Totally being underutilized, like we've already discussed, but I got to start at the beginning. when you're not leveraging the strategic partnership, then you're also underutilizing their ability to make decisions or help you make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge one. Again, if you're only viewing the function as having value in the beginning and at the end, even in your example of like reading the comp strategy, the comp structure, and being like, oh, you're being condescending. I translate that as Hiba said something that you did not understand or you did not like, and the answer is not driving to the outcome that you want. So now we got to like make it personal. Mm-hmm. But that's not partnership.
That is what happened. Right. To be very clear, that is what happened.
It's very administrative. It's you. I'm coming to you because you're supposed to make this thing happen in the way that I want. And what they got was, no, actually, I know what I'm doing. So there's a little bit of frustration there. I think there's the other aspect of how our function truly drives, or at least should be better positioned to drive culture. Again, this has to do with alignment, has to do with structure, but we are the experts in creating and sustaining the proper culture. Do we have leaders who can derail that very quickly? Yes, that's what we battle against each and every day in most of our workplaces. We get that. But again, to completely bypass us as those partners in building culture is such a huge misstep, and we see it all the time. And I think as a third bucket, just having the practical insights around talent. Again, not only under our own roof, but what else is happening in the industry. You made the great point earlier that we get to knock on the door of our competitors and say, hey, HR or people to people, like, what are you guys seeing? Here's some of our challenges. And it's actually not that as big of a deal or transgression versus if your CEOs are sharing that information.
Yeah. I think it's really funny because I've gotten so good at sniffing it out, where like when a leader comes to me and they're like, I want to fire this person. I'm like, oh, really? That's where you want to start the conversation?
Yeah.
That's how I know right away. When a leader comes to me and the first thing they say to HR is, I want to fire this person, my first thought is, oh, you don't see me as a partner anymore. Like you've shown me your cards. You see me as the person who's going to exit someone from this organization. And the reality is I'm about to put you on blast. I'm about to ask you so many questions about, did you set expectations? What goals are you setting? What feedback did you give them? What coaching have you given them? How have they fallen short? How have you fallen short? And so I think a lot of times, like when you're thinking across the organization, like, does someone appreciate my value? Does somebody, understand how strategic and helpful I can be? Look at what they're coming to you for.
Yep.
If they're coming to you for things before they actually become problems, then they see you as a partner. If they're only coming to you when something has become a problem, they are seeing you as the retroactive person who's going to clean everything up for them and not have a say in how to actually make it better. And I think like a lot of business leaders fall into the, well, HR will clean it up for me bucket versus falling into the HR is my partner on actually making my team more efficient, more engaged, more productive. So I think like our value is overlooked often, but looking and assessing what people are coming to you for in the business will help you get an understanding of how you're perceived. And unfortunately, I hate that saying perception is reality.
Yeah.
I'm like, that sucks. Cause like, what if people think I'm like a bitch? Then like, I'm not really a bitch. I'm just perceived, what I mean? Never. But I think there's something to be said there. Like if people are only coming to you as their fixer, they're overlooking your strategic value. Like they've shown you your cards, you just know.
But even again, with your example, they came to you with like, hey, carry my water. And you're like, no, I got questions. So what then happens? Potentially, they get a little retaliatory and they're like, well, the next time I want to do something, I'm going to bring Hiba in even later than before, opposed to understanding that, no, I actually need to have my ducks in a row in general before I go to Hiba as my partner, or at least having more of the thought process of Hiba is my partner in the seat that she's in. I think there's also an unfortunate misconception that for those in our industry, if nothing else, we do keep compliance front of mind. We do think about, little things like the laws and regulations and making sure that we're minimizing as much exposure as possible. And again, this cuts two ways. Yeah. Sometimes we overdo it. sometimes in ensuring that we are keeping our teams and organizations so compliant, we are overstepping the bound of what our leaders hear as being strategic for the org versus protecting against risks that don't exist to them yet. Right? That's the problem.
Yeah.
Someone has to do it. And unfortunately, it's a part of our function. We're not all legal and regulatory, but I think that's part of that translation that we have to do more finessing around. And that's where, again, that partnership word is really important.
Yeah. I wish people actually understood that. That's a misconception. I wish people understood more that there are laws that regulate how I do work. Because nobody else is thinking about that. Like, you think your sales leader is thinking about that. You think maybe your marketing leader, if you think about like data and GDPR in Europe, like, yes, they're probably thinking about like laws and regulations. But like, I wish more employees understood, like, not only am I filtering through like what's best for the company, I also have to think about, can I legally do this? There are 50 states in the US, and every state has different laws. And I think like a lot of people are just like, oh, our HR leader just does whatever they want. And I'm like, no, my dude, I got to literally look up, like, if I'm offboarding someone in California, I got to pay them a paycheck that week. You know what I mean? Like, that paycheck has to be cut and sent to them. Like, there are laws around that. They have vacation. I got to pay it out. And so I think a lot of people forget that we're also balancing like legally what needs to be done. And with that comes also risk and exposure. And so like, if we're the only people thinking about risk and exposure at the company, you're just set up to fail. And so something I do with everyone I work with is I always make clear, if I think that down the line there's going to be some sort of like thing that they need to know about, I will tell them ahead of time. So I'll say, hey, I know you want to hire someone in that country. FYI, if we hire someone in that country, they have different laws when it comes to like severance and offboarding. Here's what you need to know. I don't think it's going to fail, but I think prior to us even hiring them, you have to understand that there are things at play that you might not know, that you don't actually have a decision-making power over, and I don't have decision-making power over because I'm beholden to these set of rules. So I do wish more people talked about that aspect of it, because I think it's lost on so many employees and leaders.
It's unfortunate that the proactivity is held against the function, held against us in the industry. And unfortunately, it also feeds into like, that's what makes us the chaperones. That's what makes us the wet blankets. That's why we got to bring them in late, because they're going to slow things down. Yeah. Slowing things down so we don't get sued, slowing things down so, our licenses don't get suspended and things of that nature. It's not a bad thing, but to be the ones that are always proactively thinking ahead of those exposure points is really difficult. It's unfortunate, but it does lead into those misperceptions.
Yeah. Oh man. I always call myself like the adult in the room. Like, I feel like I'm the downer, because everyone will be like, we should do this thing. And I'm like, well, actually, we like can't really do that. It's like, here are the other things we're gonna have to think about if we do that. And if we do that incorrectly, I'm gonna have to follow up. And these are all the papers I'm gonna, and everyone's like, whoa, Hiba, okay. And I'm like, I just want everyone to know I'm really fun in real life.
Right.
I'm like really fun in real life, and I'm fun at work. But like, also, I'm not breaking no laws for you. I'm not. And like, that means, unfortunately, I don't get to do all the fun things I want to do sometimes. So I'm like, can't do that. Right. That's the law. That's wrong.
Someone has to do it.
I think we've talked a lot of, I know, but someone has to do it. It's us. And that's why I think like our relationship with everyone at the org is incredibly complicated and is so nuanced. And there are days where I wake up and I'm just like, I just want to be everyone's friend, and I want to have fun too. And I want to kick back and say all the crazy shit I would normally say. But then I'm reminded that's not my role, unfortunately. And I don't know. It just feels, this job is very lonely.
For sure. And just to add to that, to everyone else that's not quite in the industry that's listening to this episode, we are employees too. Hard stop.
It's lost on the employees. I'm like, do you not understand? I also work here.
Yep.
Like, everything you're dealing with, I'm dealing with as well. But not only that, I have to advocate for you, and I advocate for myself. And you're going to act like I'm above the rules. I'm not above the rules. One more misconception. I'm I'm heating up, Chris. I'm heating up. Got to watch out. I'm on fire. Pretty soon, NBA Jam rules are going to come into play, and I'm going to be on fire. I'm heating up.
Let's do it.
I love that I just threw back my reference to one of my favorite video games of all time. Okay. This misconception that I can fire whoever I want. Everyone's like, yeah, you can fire whoever you want. I'm like, I can? Really? Because all of you would be fired if I had my choice. People be acting like HR is like the end all be all. I want one thing, it's going to happen. I'm like, I am beholden to the company leadership who, if you've raised venture capital, is beholden to a board of directors and has a fiduciary requirement to do a lot of things. And I'm just like, I wish employees understood that like I don't get to do whatever I want every day. Not only am I beholden to like these leaders and potentially a board, and if you're a publicly traded company, even more hoops you have to jump through. I also am battling the law. So when employees make callous comments like, you can fire whoever you want, I'd be like, I wish. I would have fired all y'all already. I got my list. This is like Survivor. I'd be voting you all out. Like,
it's like a daily fight for one's life. Again, internally, externally, the federal government, state and local government. It's like it's everyone and everything.
Do you see why this job is so hard? I just say don't. You know why this job is hard, but like, I wish everyone would listen to this podcast. Like every CEO out there needs to listen to this because, like, come on, this job is not hard. This job is not easy. Okay, let's talk a little bit about. We've like talked about a bunch of stuff on like the skills we need, misconceptions we have, how it's important for us to understand the business. I want to look a little futuristic. I like to like end every episode like a little bit of, I'm already heating up, so we're about to be on fire for this next segment. Like just the future of HR. And I'm curious to know, how do you see the role of HR and people, talent, culture evolving in the next decade? Maybe particularly when it comes to like our leadership.
Yeah, decade feels like a really long time right now.
10 years? What the fuck?
Like, it's insane. It's really insane.
So old.
Okay, so I got a couple thoughts bouncing in my head right now. For starters, I'm a little bit on the fence as to how well we're doing as an industry when it comes to generative AI. And if we are falling behind, if we aren't necessarily as interested as other business functions, but more importantly, how it's going to continue to impact every organization and its impact on us as a function. I think that in the early portions of it, there's some really specific roles that I'm a little concerned about. Maybe putting them on the endangered species list. But that's neither here nor there. I think there's an aspect where part of that strategic vision has to be, where are we going more holistically? And then where are we going as a function? I think where we're going to become really important is we're going to see more of a hybrid in our work environments. And no, that's not a return to office type of tagline as much as hybrid between humans and actual robots. We've been talking about the robotics. We've been talking about AI and machines for decades now. But like, I think we are actually at the precipice of having to consider, when we're doing workforce planning, how many of our staff are human beings versus other. And we really need to be strategic partners as to how do we blend, how do we potentially upskill, how do we make the proper evaluative process, or how do we have the proper evaluative process to make sure certain functions, certain roles actually should be, whether it's outsourced or actually infused with AI versus finding different people for those functions and roles. I think that's something that we really need to step into. I think that also has a huge impact on employee experience. I don't think over the next 10 years, hopefully not the next 25 years, that we will have organizations that have no actual humans in them. I hope that's not the case, because I don't think as a society in our country would actually be able to let the robots create a utopia for us so that we're not actually working. We get to do all the things that we just love to do. But we have to be in a better position, a better seat, where leadership is looking to us with our expertise, with the data, with the analytics, with all that we know as practitioners, as how do we do what's best for the business? Because at the end of the day, we are with organizations for some sort of goal, product creation, service delivery, whatever. But what's best for the business? And I do believe over the last like 20 years, we did what was best for the business at the expense of the employee. I think definitely since the pandemic and a little bit before then, but definitely since the pandemic, the employees like, no, we for sure need to be taken into account a lot more than we feel that we have been taken into account. But we need our people leaders to actually resonate with those org leaders of, even if we are going to bring in the robots, we have to worry about the people. And what does that mean for our individuals? And if it means we have to say, this is your stop on our bus, then that's fine. But we should also offer things like outplacement. We should have more ideas for upskilling through our learning and development, through even some of our professional development practices. And that's where I see a lot of value for our function over the next 10 years.
Absolutely. I think about AI every day. It's starting to disturb me. I wasn't thinking about AI every day last year. And now every time I think about like, okay, I make the joke a lot, but like when I think of AI, I think of like Skynet and Terminator, which is like not appropriate. And I probably need to remove my bias that AI is like evil and going to take over the world. But
sure.
But with that being said, I think there's so again, HR, there's so much upskilling involved in just our job as well, because anything that impacts the world is going to potentially impact our job and impact our employees. Yep. So like just add this to the list of one more thing that HR leaders, you really want to be that strategic partner in the room. You want to be the people that everyone looks to. You should be thinking about generative AI, what role it's going to play at your company, and exactly what you said, Chris, like what jobs are going to change or evolve based on that. Q, who was a guest last season, has a HR community for like AI people who are just like very interested in like what prompts you should be asking. I can share it in the show notes, but highly recommend like joining the community. I'm in it and I just like see things coming through, and it's like actually just helping my brain understand how is AI going to impact HR and our employees. And so like, I love that you brought that up. And I just think like, I feel like we're at this inflection point. God, I hope I'm not wrong. I hope in like 20 years, we don't listen to this podcast and people are like, God, they were so dumb. But I feel like we're at this inflection point where like work needs to dramatically change. It has in the last 4 years a little bit with the impacts of COVID, but I am looking forward to the next 10 years to really see work become better for the employees and HR, in the sense that we're thinking about things like, how do we use technology to do our administrative tasks so we can focus on the things that are creative and fill our cup more, to the point where we're thinking about like, how can we automate things so it's a more seamless experience? How do we personalize everything so everyone feels special at work? And I just think like the next 10 years could be potentially some of the most exciting years we have, or also some of the worst. Who knows?
I mean, at this point, who knows?
At the rate we're going, right? I'm going to be optimistic for this episode. Some episodes, I'm like, everything's on fire and it sucks. This episode's a season opener, so I will be optimistic for this one. That's what I'm excited for. So like, as you're listening to this, if you have not thought about AI, your strategy, leveraging it, I really encourage you as an HR leader to start thinking about that. Do your research, get into the free communities, reach out to people who are experts, because it's going to change the way we do work, and you do not want to be behind on this type of thing. Again, future thinking. One last one. What changes would you like to see, like you personally, Chris, your dream, in how organizations perceive and integrate HR leaders?
Yeah, probably starting with not all employees are a monolith. I think in general, like management science and the way that we lead our people, which is actually kind of odd because I come from a school of thought. I'm former Gallup, behavioral economics. We know that there are very specific aspects of the human experience that then impact things like buying decisions, or how we connect, how we interact, how we make psychological connections with brands, with people, right? But I still think we still treat our employees like a monolith. We need 5 sales people, and all 5 are going to do these things each and every day. It's going to yield the same type of results each and every week, every month, and it doesn't make any sense. I think if we could, stop treating people as if they aren't unique chaotic beings, that would be really helpful. If we then started to support our people leaders as those who are actually the experts in understanding the nuances of individuals and the experts in connecting the performance needs to the specific unique talents that these individuals are bringing. If we actually looked again as those partners to get their expertise as to how do we put A plus B to equal C versus either saying, you people lead need to get us 100 new people in the next 3 weeks, or we need to lay off 100 people in the next 3 hours. Figure it out.
Dang. That's a good one. I have a different answer. That's a good one, but I have a different answer.
Let's do it.
I want more HR leaders to be considered for CEO roles. And it's like I'm taking it like a very different direction with this question. I just think in the past, it was like the CFO pipeline to CEO. And I wrote a newsletter about this last year. I called it the CPO path to CEO, where I listed a few different HR leaders who made that change. And I want more HR leaders to be considered and perceived as experts in how to build truly great companies. And I think a lot of times that pressure is put on CEOs. And I think HR leaders would be like a good path to CEO. Very different answer, though. I took it very meta.
No, I mean, I love that answer. I think there's so much wisdom in it. And I think what we've been discussing today, if nothing else, I think what hinders some of that, what's the word that we should use? Pipeline. Some of that pipeline action is perceptions, right? It's the acumen, because it's either we aren't viewed, our function isn't viewed as having the business acumen, or we actually don't, and that's why we're not actually stepping into it. But if we want to get into hot takes real quick, one aspect that I think we have to own a little bit more, and shout out to Safe Space, because I love Safe Space. We also have to be better of holding our friends and our colleagues accountable when they aren't it. There are times where what actually holds us back as an industry is we aren't being the most truthful with not only ourselves, but with our friends and colleagues in the space. I'll take a pause.
Okay, Chris.
I'll let people gather their breath.
I'm gasping. Y'all, my face is so red right now. He's putting us on blast.
There's a bit, it's a coaching thing as well. In the same vein, I've gotten feedback that I didn't love, but it's a blind spot. There's an aspect where this is what's feeding into some of the negative perceptions of our function and of our industry, which is somehow we're always the victim. And that's not true, and that's not fair, because there's so much being asked of those in the people's seat. However, there are times where, as much as you might need a spaced event and I need a spaced event, if we never check each other, the unfortunate thing is, as you said before, this is a very lonely position to be in, that if we're not even checking each other off script, unofficially, if I'm not saying, but I think XYZ was being wild and what you said to them was actually hilarious, but you probably shouldn't have said it the way that you did. And you might want to come back around and reinforce the point a little bit differently so that your view as a leader and to lead others isn't skewed or it isn't harmed. And sometimes we're just in the same seat for too long. And I think we need to have a different type of accountability to one another of saying, like, you might need a sabbatical or a new opportunity. Because I think that also hinders us from being considered, maybe not for the CEO role of the organization we're with today, but the next CEO role. Because for the most part, many of us don't change industries very frequently. So every industry is pretty small, and we'll hear about you. We hear about other leaders where we're vetting them. And so there's an aspect too where I think we can have a little bit more accountability of even developing and supporting our friends in the space to make sure that we're all growing together.
Yeah, I did not pay him to make that plug about Safe Space, but thank you for bringing that up, because that is like kind of it's a core tenet in Safe Space, honestly. Yeah. Like we go there and we get like gut checks, like, hey, am I am I wiling out right now? Am I being gaslit? Like, is this real? Does this happen to you? And I think we get a lot of feedback from our peers that like help us either stay the course or decide, oh God, we need to pivot radically. And I think like just personally, I have surrounded myself and my life and my friends and my family with people who will call me on my bullshit, because that is how we get better and evolve as people. I never want to be around people who just hype me up and are yes people, because that to me is a missed opportunity to like really actually do the hard work it takes to be better. And like, I think there's so much improvement I can do as like a person personally, even in my HR role and me as a person. And I think if I continue to surround myself with friends and like close colleagues that are willing to have those discussions with me, that I'm only going to get better in my craft and personally in my life. And so that's like where I do think like a community like Safe Space holds us accountable. Where like, even if you just want to vent about something, people will say like, I just want to vent about this. And then we're just like, yeah, we've been there. But then you'll always find somebody in the comments be like, okay, but here's what you can do next to like make sure this doesn't happen again. And I kind of love that. And like, this job is lonely. Like, I don't get to shit talk with work week employees.
Yep.
I have no one to shit talk to, although my best friend does know every single coworker by name and the problems I have. But like, that's just like my best friend. But like, Safe Space is a great space, and it's safe. It's called Safe Space because I felt like I didn't have a safe space. I literally sat up at 3 a.m. and I was like, my community needs to be called Safe Space because I don't have that. I don't have it at my job because I can't say all the things I want to say. And so I do think like there's so much we can learn from one another. Okay. I want to end on like a high note, even though I feel like that was like very motivational. If I choose to myself, what advice, we're going to end on one piece of advice. What advice would you give? Even though I feel like we just gave a lot of advice, so maybe we could just, I don't know. We'll see. What advice would you give to current HR leaders who are struggling to be seen as strategic partners? Bring it back, run it back full circle.
For starters, asking ourselves if we're in the right seat. And I don't mean that of if they can handle the role as much as, are you in the right culture? Are you with the right people that actually, you used the phrase earlier, fill your bucket? Because if there's two things that I would say about my personal life today is I value knowing where we stand, and I don't fight to be in rooms where I'm not wanted. So if you feel like you are being underutilized, God forbid, disrespected, part of that question is the juice worth the squeeze? Should you be fighting to actually have a different relationship in the current organization that you are in? If you go through that analysis and the answer is yes, the fight is worth it, I would say the most straightforward pathway of changing how you are viewed and changing relationships that you have with your counterparts or with the organizational leadership, which hopefully then cascades to everyone else, is better connecting your efforts to the overall outcomes of the business. If we stay on that thread of being more administrative than not, or at least perceived as being more administrative than not, running employee engagement surveys every year on time and starting on time, ending on time within a 2-week increment, getting everyone's reports out and helping them understand those reports actually isn't valuable to someone outside of our function. Being able to say, because of our data over the last 3 administrations, we have seen productivity go up. We have seen revenue, profitability go up. We have been able to thwart some of our turnover. We've been able to actually improve our pipeline for things like succession planning or managerial development and things of that nature. So actually better connecting those activities that you are responsible for and executing on. I'm not saying that you need to be late on things as much as make sure that you are telling the story. Because if you're not telling the story, your value will always be lost.
I have nothing to add because that was just so beautiful. I want to end that there. I have nothing to add. That's great advice. Like, if your goals are ever not related to what the business is trying to achieve, why are you even doing them?
Mm-hmm. Nope, doesn't work that way. Say.
Okay, but one more fun bonus thing just for the last 5 minutes. If I tell you my top 5 strengths. Do you want to read me for filth a little bit and just tell me all the bad things about myself?
That's not how strengths-based. That's not how strengths-based work. That's not what we do.
Okay, never mind.
But yeah, tell me your 5.
Maybe we can do it.
I'll tell you about you, but I won't like read it for filth.
Why not? I feel like that could be really fun.
Because we focus on our unique talents and our strengths.
I know, but like I said, there's always the basements, you know? Okay, let me tell you my top. Let me tell you my top 5. Are you ready for this?
Ready.
I have to go look these up. Okay, my number 1 is and always will be strategic.
Love it.
My number 2 is activator.
Okay.
My number 3 is arranger.
Okay.
My number 4 is command.
Uh-huh.
And my 5th strength is individualization. Tell everyone about me.
So for starters, we share 3 of our top 5s.
Not surprised.
Right? So already a biased approach here. So mine are relator, individualization, arranger, strategic, and deliberative. Arranger is my favorite of my top 5. Not surprised.
Same.
So let's just go really quickly. You're 1 through 5. So you're strategic. Effectively, your lens in which you see the world. You have a really uncanny ability of getting us from point A to point B. You are going to find that path of least resistance pretty quickly. What's really cool moving into your second one, your activator, is once you see the path, you are ready to actually run down that path. And based on the energy that you have, you typically motivate others to run with you. If we want to talk about basements, sometimes that energy or that enthusiasm to start can be a little stressful for others that want to have more of what they believe to be a methodical and measured approach, because they might not understand how quickly you can actually find that path of least resistance because your number 1 is strategic. Number 3 of arranger. The reason it's my favorite is because I think it makes my other 4, my top 5 really go. Those with high arranger, they know how to take the pieces, the people, and put them in the right configuration to give us the maximum output for whatever we're trying to do. So if we're, again, telling the story, you've got the vision with that strategic, you are really excited to go down that route with said vision, and you actually want to make sure that everyone is in the right seat, in the right place to make that strategic vision actually come to life. The command we love. So the command means you are someone who innately, if there is a bit of a void, if there is an unwavering confidence, you will step into that quiet aspect to say, hey, we need to either do this or we need to stop doing that. That's where your value of your command is. That's why it's an influencing theme. And then finally, your individualization. The way that I describe individualization is it's the people watching theme. I've always described my individualization. I always describe my individualization as I see each and every person on this planet as their own TV or movie. And I am watching each individual for what makes them them. And that way I can then monitor, or maybe even, what's a better word than monitor? I can then dictate how I interact with them based off of what I've learned that they like because they're a unique person. So it's little stuff that if you are maybe a little more introverted, picking up the phone to talk to you might not be your favorite. That's cool. I can text, I can email. And if that's where our relationship really is, because you'll appreciate that you don't have to really have that extroverted type of interaction, that's fine with me.
Wow, that was really cool. For anyone listening who has not done their strengths, like, not that this is sponsored by Gallup, I just recommend taking it. Honestly, like, it unlocked a lot of self-awareness for me personally.
Yep.
Yeah, that was really fun. Man, I really wanted you to read me for filth, though. I really wanted you to be like, you are bossy and you're bossy. That's the only one I could think of.
It sounds like you just want me to call you bossy.
I am bossy. No, but I actually did my strengths and then unlocked my full 40. It's 45? No, 35. 35.
34.
Yeah, 34. Sorry. Wow,
Yep.
numbers today.
That's fine.
I unlocked my full 34, and I'm not going to lie, I went straight to the bottom to see what my bottom strengths were. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about me, I don't know what does. I said I like went straight to the bottom to see what my bottom strengths were. Not the purpose of the
unfortunately,
exercise.
that's how that works.
Okay. So I feel like we've done a good job of, spending today talking about why HR's relationship with everyone else is complicated. Like, remember when they used to do Facebook statuses? Like, it's complicated. Also, if you ever use that, I never did. But like HR's relationship with the organization, it's complicated. We talked about why. We talked about the barriers we're facing. And you gave some like really amazing advice. And then bonus, we did a little strengths. Read me for filth, but not really. So I think people are leaving with a lot of really good tips on how to think about their role in HR and setting themselves up for the future. If people are interested in getting in touch with you, how should they find you?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe even in the show notes, we'll drop my LinkedIn.
We will.
You can follow our LinkedIn page, our Instagram, and Astute Edge. And as always, again, just really appreciative of always our partnership, our friendship, your tutelage to me of just understanding the industry. And shout out to Workweek of just understanding what a great practitioner and leader that they have in you and giving you the space to do what you do best each and every day. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Damn, dude, trying to make me cry? That's fucked up. I feel real emotional right now. That was great. This is such a great episode.